Good afternoon, Mr. Herbert Mensah. Welcome to Kawowo Sports. Thanks for sparing the time to join us for this meeting. First of all, congratulations on winning the presidency for Rugby Africa for the next 4 years. It was a dominant result in the race, wasn't it?
It was. No, good afternoon to yourself, to your viewers, to the people of Uganda. I'm honored to be able to speak to all of them, and it was quite decisive. It gives a mandate, but I need to say that it's not about me, it's about Africa, and it's about all the presidents who share the dreams, the aspirations, as well as the pain of rugby on our continent.
Any words, any message you'd like to send to Andrew Wall, first of all, your opponent in the race, and the rest of Ugandan rugby?
Oh no, definitely. Look, Andrew is a smart, wonderful man, and I spoke to Andrew after the event, reassured him of the future, and he must stay active. I hope he will support Godwin. I have a lot of respect for Godwin. Godwin also stood for the EXCO in the event that Andrew did not win, because he was keen that Uganda have a say. It's important. If you're not at the high table, it's difficult to push through your own agenda beyond a point. And as you know, both of them, Andrew wanted to be president, and Godwin is passionate about rugby in Uganda. And so we welcomed him, and I thought he would get on. He just missed out. The normal AGM interpolitics on the night. But I believe that both of them have a role to play. Both of them should be proud. The people of Uganda should be very proud of both of them. And as I said, Andrew should be involved at some point. And Godwin, I really do hope that we will be able to continue working together.
Right. Thank you very much. Before we getting right into it, I would like to, if you please, would you please give us a brief introduction of yourself with your administrative and playing career, and how you have come through this journey to being Rugby Africa president, briefly.
Well, if you've asked somebody about Herbert Mensah, then you would say controversial, a maverick, a free thinker. I don't follow establishment. I try to think out of the box. And I believe that we should all present ourselves in a way that we don't owe anybody anything in terms of our integrity and what it is that we're about. I'm 63 this year. I played rugby most of my younger life. I played international rugby in Zimbabwe. I played for Mashonaland. I played one international against Italy. In England, I played county rugby for Sussex. And I played for Saracens in the first team in the season that after I left Zimbabwe at that level. I came to Ghana injured. I ended my playing career in England. The last London Merit Table game, that was Saracens against London Scottish. And I have never played serious rugby. Ghana is a country that is not a rugby playing nation. So to get involved in local rugby was easy, undemanding at that time. And so rugby is in your blood, you know, you live it, you breathe it. I'm happy to have played from schoolboy age right the way through. University, the level was good, but not good enough. So I went straight into club rugby. And I played for Sussex. I'm happy to say one game I played against, you're too young, but great old timers like Maurice Colclough, one of the greatest locks in English, British Lions time, and other great players. And I've kept very close to the game of rugby. And, you know, once it's in your blood, it'll be there forever. So I have. My experience in Zimbabwe was great. I played for Old Hararians. I think at that time I was the only black player playing in Zimbabwe. So you can tell that was a long time ago. There were some great European white players playing. Hawkin Mort, Ray Mort's brother. I think Ray Mort is one of the greatest right wingers to ever play rugby. Young people should go and Google him when he played for Transvaal. Eric Barrett, extraordinary Springbok B player. Robertson, Brian Murphy. They're the people that I camped with, played with, who were up at Springbok level when I was in Zimbabwe. That was 1983 time, that sort of time period. So rugby is rugby. It's in your blood. It's in your blood.
Yeah, without a doubt. So before coming to Rugby Africa, I understand you were also on the executive committee in the last term of office. Is that true? Is that right? Did I get that right?
Yes, I was co-opted. So I was not a full member.
Well,
I had no vote. But I stood in 4 years ago because I believed that Rugby Africa needed to move in a certain direction. I was clear in my mind that unless it is that you looked at the sport differently and understood the fact that sport is big business, understood that you are in a position where the sport is undercapitalized, that the relationships perhaps could have been better managed in different ways. And this is no criticism to anybody, but you cannot start your period saying, I will receive $2 million or whatever it is from your World Rugby, and you run 30-something states, competitions, travel, administration across the continent of Africa. It doesn't work. And the last 4 years, it hasn't worked. And if that is what is going to happen for the next 4 years, it won't work. So it's a philosophical difference in terms of how you look at it and how you approach it, which is the way I've always looked at sports over the last 20-something years. I run one of the greatest football clubs in Africa, Kumasi Asante Kotoko, with a pedigree and a history.
We will dive deeper into your vision for Rugby Africa, but I would love to, if you could please list down the people that are on your executive committee, or maybe if that can be shared later after we finish the meeting, so that we can know the full composition of the Rugby Africa Executive Committee and then other members of the members of the ordinary committee. I think that would be very nice, because I've not been able to get that from all the Rugby Africa platforms.
I will definitely do that. I think that is symbolic of where we are. The old management are having to quickly adjust to a different style and a different way. And one is certainly the imagery, the speed of reacting. The AGM was last week. We should already have a structure in place right now that shows that Aaron Jani from Zimbabwe is the treasurer.
Yeah.
That shows that Yuri Roo from Saru is still the general secretary general. I am the president. The vice president is Nasa Buja, but cannot take his seat for a while until the problems in Morocco are resolved. For the first time ever, we have 3 women on the EXCO. We have Paula from Kenya, who was nominated by Burundi.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. We have Roland from Burkina Faso, and we have a young lady, a lady of the future called Udia from Benin. Extraordinary lady. So you have that. We have Adama from Senegal, who I'm hoping we will get in to fulfill the role that Andrew had before in terms of rugby committee. We hope so. On top of that, we have Aref from Tunisia. We have Sofiane from Algeria. On the committee, you put me on the spot. I know I've left out 1 or 2 people who are going to say to me, how can you go onto a program and not bring us? But we got Kevin Venkia as well from Madagascar.
Yes.
I think that is the 11. Is that not right?
Should
and
be.
if that is the 11.
We'll double check
That's
the list at the end of the meeting.
check it. If I missed out, I apologize greatly.
All right, it's okay. So first of all, one of the most popular and recurring statements that you've been sharing, which you've already shared right now in your vision for Africa, and what I think will be the trademark of your administration for the next 4 years, is that sport is big business. Before we go into your vision for African rugby, if you could share a little bit more about what you mean by sport is big business and what that will mean for Rugby Africa.
Well, simply put, we need to change the image. The imagery has to be got right. We have to look at internal structures that Rugby Africa becomes more attractive. The fact of the matter is that capital has a choice and sponsors have a choice. And if we ignore that fact, then where we are is that you'll never be able to raise the money. You need to recognize the fact that we're in a different world right now. And the world that we're living in is one that is hugely challenged. As I said, sponsor fatigue is massive. Governments themselves are struggling. We have to be in a position where we recognize our limitations. We do not have a right. We don't have the right to tell World Rugby or anybody else, give us more money, because everybody's taken a certain view about money. But yet it is, we have to be creative, and we have to look around and see how it is we can raise the money. That is critical. Without money, you can't have competitions. Without money, you can't do other related matters. The right to play, getting into rugby, junior competitions, under 18s, under 20s, regional competitions, which become part of where it is that we're about. You need money. So if you understand that sport is big business, then you're halfway there in terms of the approach that you're going to take in order to make that work.
All right, thank you very much for a little bit of more insight on what I think I am buying into it now, that sport indeed is big business. Yeah. So
it is very much.
Yeah. Let's talk about your vision for African rugby. What are some of those things that you've earmarked and highlighted as the first things that you will tackle in your first year as Rugby Africa president?
I think that I'm a realist, and I've been very careful not to make vague promises. But if you want to change and attract interest, you need to change how people see you. And if you want to change how people see you, you've got to deal with imagery. If you want to deal with imagery, then we need to start first and foremost with issues of governance. And there are governance issues all over the continent. So we need to look at that. World Rugby introduced a code of ethics a few years ago that was never adopted by Rugby Africa. We need to incorporate that into the way that we think, we behave, and we react. We need to be able to get back to big business and small business and into opportunity to say, look at us. We are really all that. Then it is that people are prepared to look at the game. We have serious limitations on our continent, which is a continental free view or accessible television station. We don't have one. It's not like Europe that your Canal Plus or Sky or whatever it is simply covers the whole continent. We don't have one that covers Anglophone, Francophone, and covers the whole continent. So sponsors are always going to be a little bit different. It's not about putting your name on their shirts or putting money into something and they know they're going to get the coverage everywhere. It doesn't quite work like that. Africa is a continent. It's not a country. So it's not like Europe. You can deal with Europe as one, because 2 hours you can fly from London to Rome. You can come from Georgia to Europe in 2.5 hours. Even Helsinki, which is far away, is a 2 3/4 hour, 3-hour flight. Africa, just imagine somebody going from Senegal to Madagascar. I mean, how many hours? How long does it take?
Yeah.
How much money does it cost? So we need to really tackle some major issues as Africans, because if you're charging $100 a time, $50, $150 a time, on top of all the other expenses. If there isn't one national airline that you can do business with and say, this is Africa, Rugby Africa's program for the year, we want to enter into a business deal with you, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, then there are problems. So we have to really try and shrink where we're going and understand. And my proposal with my colleagues is, let's deal with Africa on a regional basis. In East Africa, you have the Victoria Cup. Why can't that be reignited, managed in a way that it has a commercial reality to it? How do we ensure that the biggies, and I call the biggies, we're talking about Kenya, Uganda, Zimbabwe, can't join Namibia, and then you add Algeria to that, who were third, as you know, in the RAC competition. So if it is that you start getting those big countries, and then it is you start looking to say, how do you raise funding for them? Because until, let's take it, Uganda start doing very well on the global scene, consistently, then there's no hope for the smaller countries. You know, World Rugby and the rest will be looking at America now. They're looking at South America. We went through the phase of looking at Portugal and all these kind of countries. We really do need Kenya and Uganda to pick up the pace. We need Zimbabwe to be up there with, so that it's not just Namibia going for another World Cup. You know, and part of my mantra, I was on Al Jazeera this morning, and I was saying that I was asked a similar question. And I said, we need our governing bodies to invest in us. Because I remember Sepp Blatter in 2008 or whenever it was, taking a big decision that the World Cup would be held in South Africa on the African continent. Taking a big decision that we needed to change the number of African countries allowed to participate in the World Cup. So you need to meet us halfway. Our economies may not be strong enough in Uganda, in Kenya, in Zim, to be able to fund the national teams to go to Currie Cup or play in a European league or something. But that investment needs to take place, as well as giving us an additional slot. 2027 or whenever it is, 15s, there should be an additional slot for Africa, not just one. There needs to be an additional one or two. There should be the motivation to say, you've got 2 or 3 African countries now going for this competition. And World Rugby and others will now turn around and increase the investment in Africa. So it doesn't become, you got to do better before we give you the money. We need to follow the football way and have the belief.
I think that is one of the heartfelt things when it comes to African rugby. Why can we not have more African nations at the Rugby World Cup? And one of the reasons has been our performance. And it would be very nice to see what we are doing to deserve the slot at the Rugby World Cup, because I do not think it is going to be handed down to us by Rugby World Cup or World Rugby.
No, you're right. It's going to also take our relationships. We start with good governance. We start with internal structures, which we need to change. The mindset needs to change. Then it is that we need to really look at our human resource issues and the management of. Then it is that we need to look at governance issues, imagery-related matters. Then our relationship with World Rugby, RFU, FFR, and other bodies around the world. Look into country-related matters where there are training grants and the rest, not for rugby, but for administration. And you must have people who think out of the box. CSR-related programs, you don't have money this way, you might have money that way. So looking to put a team of people together who think the same, i.e., anybody who knows me knows I don't take no for an answer. If it's not right now, look for another way. If you get knocked down, pick yourself up, think about something else, and eventually you find some solution. So 2023 really is about that structure, making sure that we're all on the same platform, committees that work, and they start attacking it from both and all sides.
And so this now lends me to ask my next question about how your administration is going to be like. How are we going to, given your personality, you've mentioned that you're a realist, you're a controversial person, you do not take no for an answer. How different is going to be your administration from Khalid Babu and his predecessors?
Look, again, I say this with utmost respect because I have utmost respect for my predecessors. I'm not one of those who wants to come in and say bad things about people. No, we mustn't. We must give good credit to where it is they're about, recognize that they were in governance in periods of COVID, recognize that we're just different people. That's first and foremost. In order to make it work, I need to make sure the ExCo are all on the same plane. We've got to all be thinking the same. And I think that we have a lot of people. Don't forget that Rugby Africa is not like a traditional business where you can choose the people who you want on your board and then go through that process. You go through an elective process, and the elective process means that you are now with a group of people with common interests. But perhaps they've got a different vision than you do. It's not as though you brought them to. The first issue is to get this group of people together. Let them have a look and see where you're going and see whether they are ready to move in the same direction as you are. If they are, then that's half of the battle.
So in 1 minute, in 1.5 minutes, if you could please tell us what's going to be the priority. Are we going to reach more new audiences and nations in African rugby, or are we going to try and consolidate those that are already playing rugby? Africa has 54 nations, and 30-something of those are registered to Rugby Africa. What's the strategy going to be like?
I don't think that is a strategic issue. The RDOs and other key players will always be looking to develop new nations and to bring people on board. Yes, we are going to try and get more of the associate members of World Rugby recognized as full members. That we will definitely do. But as you know, the pathway for that can only happen if competitions are going ahead and internal good governance structures are being adhered to. AGM, presentation of accounts, running business in good order. That becomes critical. If we can do that, then it is that the issue of bringing smaller nations on will occur. We have enough on our plate with the big ones. Mm-hmm. We've spoken about it already.
Yes.
Separating the elite ones, pushing those. Regional competitions, making it happen. Incorporating with training, medical, and everything else, making that happen at the same time. Is there the budget for all of that? No. That is why sport is big business.
But I'd like now us to look at the Rugby Africa competitions, and I would love for us to look at them in two ways. How do we make them more attractive, both in terms of viewership and entertainment, but then also how to make them sustainable and commercially viable, not just for Rugby Africa, but for also the participating nations?
I think this is the issue of it being attractive is it goes all within the issue of imagery. And I think that is important. I think that there's been a lot of talk within the new ExCo about the fact that we need to look at 2024. There's a lot that we're not going to change this year because it was already put into the system by Khalid Babu and Andrew and guys. So a lot of what happens 2023, well, of course, we're going to try and tweak it. We're going to try and change things a bit. But competition's already set. We are going to Mauritius for the men's sevens pre-qualification. We're going to Zambia for the women's. Then we're going to Tunisia and to Zimbabwe for the finals. Yeah. That is already set. We're not changing that. As are the junior competitions, we're not changing that. What we're going to try and add, if we can get funding, is to try and get regional competitions taking place. And I know that Azuz, the general manager, has been able to raise private funding. He wants to do something in West Africa. I think that is in April. We'll soon see after our first ExCo meeting, which should be at the end of this month, and get his plans and rollout for the year. We need to get a step into the regional competitions to get what has already been planned. We're not going to turn the system upside down. That's already in place, courtesy of Babu and Andrew. But from 2024, you should see a different way in which it is that we approach this. And the way we look, the way we sound, the way we feel should be in consonance with big business. And they hopefully will see that we're moving in a certain direction and we'll react to it.
From 2024, any specific plans for women's rugby in Africa?
It starts, for me, it starts from now. You're going to find a very strong women's committee. I have such belief and love in womanhood. I really believe that women can do what men can do, especially administratively. You're going to find in the medium term to have women's in a standalone situation. I think we threw out the challenge for them to raise monies of their own. I think they can do it, and look at it in a way that we can not only mirror, but improve it and match it. And I really would like to see better level of results when the women go into global competitions. We have Madagascar and South Africa, but I believe that we have 4 or 5 nations who could, if you take that same form of professional approach to training and preparation, and I believe we have the talent for the women in countries like Kenya, Uganda. I'd say Zim, I should add Zim, even though we beat them last time. You know, I'm being funny. And there are Tunisia and other countries who are taking it seriously. But womanhood is critical. It's critical. I believe that Africa can shine in so many ways. We don't have to follow the script. We can write our own script. But I do believe that we can shine.
Awesome. Speaking of African competitions for both men and women, do you think an idea of a sort of, I understand it's different for Africa, but would it be nice to have a Champions Cup-like competition or a Super Rugby-like competition, or the MLR in USA, a competition that brings together the best of the best clubs in the different countries or franchises spread across Africa?
Wouldn't that be a wonderful dream? You come back to money. How do you do that? You need to start off regionally. If it works, you see in a couple of years, it's now moving. Business then sees that we're moving in another direction. They're happy with it. They're prepared to invest in where we're going. Then it can. Otherwise, just look at the logistics. How do you get a winning team from Senegal to Madagascar for $700? You can't. So that's the point I'm making. And there isn't one national airline. The general manager has been able to work fantastic deals with Ethiopian Airways, but these are commercial deals where you're looking to discount off list, as opposed to an Emirates kind of deal that you have in Europe, where therefore they will invest in your product because they're across the whole continent. We haven't reached that point. And therefore the logistics of simply making an inter-club, which I would love to see, believe me, that would excite me big time. And I'm not saying it's impossible, but it would be great, because we tried in West Africa to do this a while ago through something called the WAR scheme, where each country has 1 or 2 of its champions. And then there's a club championship. The trouble is that Africa is so big, you can get a vehicle, forget the aeroplane, now you go by road, which is where Adama from Senegal, who may be in charge of rugby competitions, is looking, and we're saying, why don't we ship those what we can ship by road? So then you can run competitions. But what do you do about the countries where there is ISIS and religious turmoil in Burkina Faso, Mali, and the rest? They also need to play rugby. But it's not necessarily safe to go by road. The size of the area, the logistics are a nightmare. My feeling is start. Don't wait for the conditions to become perfect, because the beauty of Africa is imperfection. So it'll never be perfect. And I'm hoping that by the time the EXO has its first, second meeting, philosophically they agree with me, because I may be president, but I need to get back to that EXCO. That EXCO really needs to understand where we are trying to go, to debate it, to argue, to agree, to disagree, but hopefully with the same passion, but the same respect that is required at EXCO level. And then we segment it off. Southern Africa, we're trying to negotiate with SARU to see whether they won't allow the Lesothos and Eswatinis to play in the Mpumalanga League. I think I pronounced it right.
Yeah.
and have access to that league so that they're playing. We've encouraged all the regions to come together, and the Southern Africans have been the first. They had a meeting in Cape Town, of which they decided Lesotho would be the new president of their structure. They've got Mozambique, Eswatini, Botswana, Zimbabwe, Zambia. So the countries there coming together, and that makes so much sense. So that we can also get back to them and say, how do we raise money? Southern African money is different than African money. How do we help you manage your competitions?
Right. One more thing. There's a couple of challenges that African rugby has been facing, and I understand many times we'll highlight money, we'll highlight the huge geographical distance, but there's a couple of things that you mentioned which I feel are African problems, are unique to Africa, but then I would also love to hear what you think the solutions would be to those challenges. And one of them is the diverse cultures. I come from a country in Uganda whereby rugby is not among the top 3 most played sports in the country, and I understand it's the same across most of Africa. Maybe like Kenya or Zimbabwe and South Africa. How do you think Rugby Africa can leverage the different cultures that we have on the African continent to make rugby one of the, if not the top sport on the continent?
No, you're right. You're absolutely right. And I think this is where there isn't a singular solution. It's got to be looked at in a multifaceted way. And I start on one side by saying NBA, I think the first year put $7 million into Africa. I may be wrong, but I heard that figure. We're at 2-point-something million for the whole year for 30-something countries. So it's very difficult to turn around and market yourself knowing the fact that the balance sheet and the money simply do not add up. Other sports are investing much heavier than rugby is in terms of the continent. And we need to get out there and market ourselves. I really believe so. I think everybody who sits on the exco, especially myself, needs to become the chief marketing officer, not director, officer of Rugby Africa. We need to sell it, the concepts. We need to go through our Filofax and speak to people. We need to look at businesses who are looking for opportunities in Africa. And then we need to come and talk to your politicians. We really do. We need to come and start at the top and then let them understand that the beautiful game of rugby provides societal change. Unlike football, and don't forget, I come from the world of Kumasi Asante Kotoko. You don't get bigger than that. A home game, I've got 60,000 in the stadium watching Kumasi Asante Kotoko when I was in charge. So you don't get bigger than that. But football doesn't give you what rugby does. Rugby gives you discipline. It gives you integrity. It gives you the ability to work with somebody else. Good rugby players look for solutions. Don't you love it when you're watching a game and you look at a player who can just see what nobody else can see? And yet it is that the team is working like an orchestra together. People are covering each other. That is norm. A player has slipped, you don't worry about it because there's somebody else there. Look at how the sevens game has evolved with defensive patterns that you can literally suffocate somebody else completely. We are the marketing officers of Rugby Africa, and I need to get the change of mindset for people to understand that.
You preempted the next question that I was going to ask you about African rugby's uniqueness in terms of our cultures, and then also our administration, our different countries, and how they are run, the politics of our different countries. So that you just hit 2 birds with 1 stone right there. I would like to pick your thought on a couple of things. One, what do you think about, so every now and then we get to hear that World Rugby is introducing a new tournament that is supposed to maybe grow the game or reach new audiences. What do you think about those tournaments as looking at it in the perspective of someone in an African rugby playing nation?
Look, it's difficult for World Rugby. They have a global policy, and the global policy makes a lot of sense. What we need to do in Rugby Africa is try and tailor their programs to our needs. We need to sit back less and work with them more, as opposed to, this is a program for you, go do it. Then we go do it. And it doesn't really permeate back down into the core of what Rugby Africa is about. So I think we need to change those relationships. We need to really look and see, and I had meetings with members of Royal Rugby yesterday. And, you know, in the next week or so, I need to see the rollout in terms of how they see Africa over the next 12 months. And then I can tell them how we see Africa in the next 12 months. And there is mutual respect. We're not there to fight with anybody. This is not what it's about. It's not a confused David and Goliath situation. It isn't at all. It's an understanding that money and capital has a choice, and the owner of the money and capital is the king. We need to let them understand that we can work together, we can be together, and that actually the way you look at us, if you look at us the way we look at ourselves, we will get more out of it for both of us. And this is, for me, is the critical issue here. So we will be looking at the program over the next year or two. We will be looking internally at how it is that we want to reach those points, because a lot of the countries in Africa have got internal issues, major internal issues. You know already, if it was a country, most of the countries, even in East Africa, may have to get involved in debt restructuring programs, their financial challenges in terms of how one operates and where one wants to go and where one wants to be. So we really do need to work internally with them, ourselves, to generate the funding, to generate where we're going, so that we can look at the guys from World Rugby and the rest eye to eye on exactly the same level. I think it's doable. When I talk to the guys from World Rugby, they want to talk, they want to deal, they want to work with us. The new program they've got that is happening in Stellenbosch next week about this program to help improve things for Uganda, Kenya, Zim, and we are having to tell Algeria, look, be patient. This is a pilot project. We now need to push the pilot project. We need to encourage World Rugby that we're working together. We need to encourage them that it seems to make sense for us, but with the view that we need to have a second play, that countries like Algeria, and we have got a number of others who are on the cusp, need to be considered, not just those in addition to Namibia. And I think that could very well work.
I'd like to now ask you about a bit of matters off the pitch, something to do with player, with putting a smile on players' faces, I could say. Away from the rugby, players would love to travel, players would love to get paid well and all, but I understand that rugby, if where I come from in Uganda, we have the Uganda Rugby Union Awards, and they came back for the first time since 2014. But then before 2014, from 2000 to 2014, there had been an annual awards event. World Rugby has World Rugby Awards, and I think Kenya should have, South Africa also have South Africa Awards, rugby awards. Would that be interesting for Rugby Africa, especially in terms of the players, but then also in terms of partnerships and relationships with some of these brands and governments?
I think that has been discussed at quite some length by a number of people. And in my campaign for presidency, I put together a strategy document along with some of the members of the Now Exco. Some didn't make it, but certainly it was one of the themes that we put out there that was actually critically important, that we do look at this continental award scheme. The problem that we have with things is that we don't want to do it via Zoom. Wouldn't it be great if we could all appear in Kampala or in Nairobi or in Cape Town or in Lagos or some Abuja, some African city, and have an extraordinary night?
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Just a quick recap of what we've talked about. We talked about your playing career, your administrative career. I'm really, really impressed with your playing career. It's one in a million for someone from where we come from to having rubbed shoulders with some of the greatest rugby players in the world. And I think I was starstruck for a moment, I should say.
Oh. No, I think it's important as well. Not everybody needs to play the game, but some people at least need to have played at least on a global level, so that you get a perspective of where it's at and where you could and should be.
Yeah. Then we talked about the composition of your current committee, which is yet to be, let's say, define the roles, but then we know the members. And I would be glad if you could share with me at least for those that are known, the president, vice president, treasurer, maybe general secretary, then plus the other members. If we could have a list of them down so I can also include them in this piece, I would be glad. And then,
Yeah. Sorry, go on.
yeah. And then we then looked at your vision for African rugby, talking about different perspectives on how you think Rugby Africa should be run, with a keen interest in looking at sport as a big business. Uh, then also we talked about competitions for Africa, but then also what we can achieve with women's rugby, and then the finances and administration. And then we have concluded with the relationship that Rugby Africa has with the rest of the world and with World Rugby as a federation. And also a number of things that we could do that could take us to the next step. But I was very much happy that we talked about what you think are going to be the most important things in the next 100 days of your administration, in the next 12 months rather, of your administration.
Absolutely. I think I outlined that, and we are not there trying to promise what we can't do, but we hope with that in mind. And if you look at the changes in structure, the way we communicate and the way we deal with people, you look at the way we respect the smaller nations, the big battle we have for the bigger nations. If the structures are in right and you start to see them, once the committees come out and you see you have the right people, and you'll see, you've been in the game, you'll see and say, wow, that's the way it's going. Then you'll be able to see that, yes, really these guys are moving in a certain direction, which is critical.
Yeah. All right. Thank you very much, Mr. President.